An artist's creation truly comes to life when shared with people. Only then does it have real power. Welcome to the August 2018 edition of For the Love of Words, Artist Interviews and Performances. I'm your host, Rich Berg, along with co-host George Camo, John Hogelson, and Colette O'Connor. In the studio with us tonight is poet Ethel Fraga and music artist Chris Payud. Artists appearing on our program have spent years, sometimes decades, of perfecting their craft to bring us beautiful works of art. And we'll start with a Q&A with Ethel Fraga. Ethel, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I am delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
I've known you for a couple of years now, and the biggest thing I notice is that everywhere you go, everybody loves you, myself included.
Thank you.
So
very
how
much.
did you get into poetry? What moved you in poetry?
When I was teaching English at the high school level, I had a difficult time getting some of the students to write. So I began using haiku with them to see if I could get them to identify an image and play with words around it. And I wrote haiku to show them what I could do with what I was asking them to do. And from that, I learned to love the haiku, and I continued writing. I hope some of them did too.
Well, in one of your venues, you had some of your students, or you had students from out of state visit?
Oh, that was my niece from Pennsylvania and some of her friends.
Some of her friends.
Yes.
Those weren't your students, though.
No.
Boy, they sounded like your students.
My niece is a dear young woman, and her friends are two young black men who write in the reggae and rap
Oh, right.
format.
Right.
Yes.
So how many of your students do you think took to poetry in some way?
I think a small percentage.
Right. And did any of them write anything profound in what I call profound in the classroom for their age?
The most profound piece I remember was written by a 9th grade boy who didn't like English at all and took a standard class, which was for students who were not college bound. And he spent a lot of time alone and rode his bicycle through the state park in East Taunton, at the Massasoit State Park.
Right.
And he knew a lot about nature and was able to identify discrete images that spoke to him. And from the silence that he allowed himself in his young life, and also from learning to identify wildflowers, he was able to write haiku. And he's now an auto mechanic in Taunton, and I stopped to have something done at his shop a year or two ago, and I mentioned to him that he was the best poet in my class, and he was amazed to hear that. And
Wow.
he doesn't continue to write. He's into auto mechanics and racing.
Well, you can be anything in one life and be a poet in your other life.
Yes.
So, when did you know that you were a poet?
I think after I retired from teaching, I spent more time with my poetry. And in the past 15 years, I've seen myself as a poet more.
Now, when people ask you about your professional life, do you say retired teacher, or do you say poet and retired teacher, or the other way around?
I consider myself an educator.
An educator.
Because even in retirement, I have continued teaching. I teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, and I also teach meditation, and I lead some retreats in contemplative practice. So I'm still an educator.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When did you
and
start?
poet.
Well, of course, and poet. That's why we're here. When did you start reading in public, at venues, or just in anything in public?
About
Because it's such a different thing than writing in the
yes.
classroom.
About 4 years ago, a former student of mine, Cheryl Peralt, who's very much into the open mic scene here and a great promoter of creativity and opportunities for artists. She invited me to read at her venue.
Right.
in Hopkinton, and that was the first time I read.
So that's the connection with you and Cheryl.
Yes.
I think you or Cheryl had mentioned that before, but I didn't remember that. And as you are, she is quite the gift to poetry. So your first time reading there was as a feature?
No, I just did a short presentation.
Right.
Mhm.
And that was, would you say, how long ago?
4 years ago.
4 years ago. Yeah, she is fabulous at getting people up at the microphone.
Yes.
What are your favorite types of poetry to write, and are they the same? Are your favorite types to read the same as they are as the ones to write? Because it's sometimes different.
Yes, I love, for example, Mary Oliver, and I write in free verse, and I also write haiku, and I also use a couple of other Japanese forms. I will read one of those tonight. In recent years, I've done a lot of free verse because I have begun writing a type of poem that I call a fado poem.
What kind again? If you could repeat that.
Fado, F-A-D-O, it's a Portuguese
F-A-D-O.
word. My parents came here from the old country, and when they were young, and they married here. But we always retained a connection with the language and with the foods and the culture. And a couple of years ago, I had broken my wrist, and my great-nephew, Matt, came to help me turn my garden over to do the heavy work.
Right.
And I was telling him family stories as we worked, and he said to me, "Annette, you're the only person in my life who tells me anything about where I came from." And that registered with me, and I said to myself, I need to write more poems about things past and precious in our lives.
Right.
And that's what Fado deals with, things past and precious. And in the musical tradition, the songs tend to be rather melancholic and are filled with feelings for things past. But there is also a kind of Fado that is more lighthearted and sensitive and loving.
When you read your poetry, I feel like I'm in the story with you, moving through the towns or the neighborhoods or the conversations or with the people. So.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I'm happy that you hear it that
And
way.
it just has that flow to it.
Mhm.
And are you reading anywhere, in August or anywhere local in August or September?
I'm reading at our own open mic in Taunton. It's called Arts and Humanities.
Right. I was going to ask you to tell us about that as well.
Yeah, I began that open mic at the Old Colony History Museum in 2016 in order to try to generate some creative energy in the community and to bring creative people together, and also to build an audience for the arts. And it's a multi-art open mic. We have poets and storytellers. We also had a photographer at the last event. And we're going to have a visual artist who does drawing and painting in September. And we have musicians as well.
It's a wonderful venue, and
Yes.
promote it when you start reading your poetry or at the end of your reading as well. I would
Great,
appreciate
and we've
that.
been fortunate to have you there with us.
That's been my pleasure. It's a wonderful venue. Well, I thank you very much, and we'll move into the performance part, and you can read some of your poetry for us. Thank you
right.
for coming to the studio.
The first group of poems that I'm going to read are I call Fado poems. Fado is a musical form in the Portuguese culture, and a fado is a song filled with saudade, which means fond feeling for things past and precious. A few years ago, my great-nephew Matt was helping me open my garden, and as we worked together, I was telling him family stories. And he said to me, "Annette, you're the only person in my life who tells me anything about where I came from." And I was so moved when he said that I later thought to myself, I need to write more poems about family story so that my nieces and nephews will have some context and some understanding of the context out of which they came. This first poem I wrote about 4 years ago when the home that I grew up in was demolished. It was on a piece of property that had been repossessed by the city for non-payment of taxes and environmental abuse of property. After the city bought the property on Tremont Street in Taunton, they demolished the farmhouse and the old barn. A friend called me one day to tell me that my childhood home had been demolished. So I drove by there about 6 in the evening when the sun was setting to see the house after it had been wrecked. And I was so moved that I went home and began writing, and over a couple of weeks' time, this poem emerged. It's a long poem because there are lots of memories. Sunset on 115. The wrecker came today, farmhouse down. Only a door remained where the piazza entrance was, leaning sideways, propped by the rubble of my childhood home. This door reminds me of relatives and friends coming to mourn Pa and then Fina at parlor wakes, and of a little girl sliding out the piazza door to run round the house in circles, not knowing how else to grieve. Of going home to my widowed mother, always there, alert, interested. Of Joe and Lou leaving for World War II, and of Ma standing at the door in tears. Of Ma's kale soup, and of her cornmeal bread, marked with the sign of the cross before placed in the oven, a blessing asked on her table. Of aunts who came to laugh, cry, and sew, to tell stories in Portuguese and in English. Of cousins who came to skate at the bog, but delayed in the kitchen to drink White Eagle soda and talk with Aunt Vanjie. Of the kids who came to call after supper, but finished the family rosary with us before we could play hide and seek. Of holiday visitors who came with guitars to sing Portuguese drinking songs at our door, and of going with them to other doors to make silly the days of Christmas. Of bringing library books home for Ma, Dag Hammarskjöld, Dorothy Day, Thomas Merton. A willingness to lift the veil. Of older brothers arriving from hard work and study, talking round our kitchen table, and of the feeling that my family was intelligent. Of being encouraged to study and to communicate clearly so that we could make the world a better place. Of leaving for grade school, high school, and college, and bringing a bigger world home to Ma, there, alert, interested. This door a reminder of a home rich with coming and going, and of a mother's presence, of the invitation to learn, love, laugh, and serve, of going forth beyond the door at 1:15. The second poem is called Ma Said I Could. I love gardening, and actually some of my poems come out of my gardening. This poem goes back to when I was 8 years old and planted my first garden, and it's called Ma Said I Could. Ma said I could. I tilled the soil round the willow tree, transplanted Queen Anne's lace and milkweed from the edge of the strawberry patch, Joe towered over me. Why aren't you playing with the other kids? I thought I was. Why are you planting weeds? I love those wildflowers. Yesterday I read in the Gazette, plant milkweed in your garden. Save the monarch butterfly. 69 years later, permission. The next Fado poem has to do with my grandmother, who spoke only Portuguese. So I have used Portuguese in this poem, and I translate what is said in the Portuguese so that the two languages are part of the poem. There is a Portuguese custom of asking blessing of elders when you meet them and when you leave them. So when we went to my grandmother's home, we would say, Vovó a sua benção, meaning, grandmother, your blessing. And she would answer, Nosso Senhor te abençoe, which means, may God bless you. The poem is called Blessing. Avó a sua benção, grandmother, your blessing. Deus te abençoe, querida filha. God bless you, dear daughter. Seated in your chair, you held my little hands on your widow's apron, called me cara linda, cara bonita, cara perfeita, menina esperta. Beautiful, pretty, perfect, and bright. You smiled and brought me into the light. Your light embraces me even now, reminding me of my gifts and your love. Você era a benção, querida vó. You were the blessing, dear grandmother. The next poem is called Mending, and it deals with a quiet moment with my mother, who was a very busy woman, raising 12 children alone after my father died. Mending. Long ago, I rose early, crept down the stairs, and found my mother mending. Happy to have her to myself, I stood by her side, rested my hands on her thigh, and shared the up-down treadle, the Jesus mercies, and the rising sun. The next poem I wrote for my brother Ed during his last illness. He died the end of January this year. Ed was 2 years older than I, and he was such a good kid, but also an itch and a tease. And I hope that the poem shows both sides of Ed. Also a great athlete. Ed, when we were kids, you planted potatoes, weeded, harvested crops, gathered hay from the fields, milked the cows. You washed the kitchen floor on Saturday, harvested a chicken for Sunday dinner. You knelt to pray the family rosary, served on the altar at St. Anthony's, and you played baseball, squatting to catch for Kohenet School, for the playground, for the CYO League, and for neighborhood pickup games in our horses field. Oh, you slipped on a horse flap, Ed? Gotcha, wise guy. The next group of poems I call forest bathing poems. Forest bathing is a Japanese term, and it has to do with being present to a forest as you walk or just sit in a forest and observing the sounds, sights, smell, the overall feeling of the forest and every natural part of it. I walk a great deal, and I've written a number of poems that come out of my experience walking in wooded areas. The first is called Sanctuary Song. A choir of young pines rooted in the alto earth sings soprano in the forest to the sun, the river, the wind, and to me, and on earth, peace. The next poem is called Cry. It's also a forest bathing poem. I walked the river trail. April sun shines. Birds tweet, trill, sing symphonic. Woodpeckers peck percussive. Dry beech leaves shelter this year's buds. Lavender brambles wait for raspberries. Swan fan and dive. The river flows. Cry joy. And the next poem is called I Want. I want to walk the forest, to smell the juicy pine, to crush needles underfoot and sit on sunlit rocks, to smell the spring clean air, close my eyes and listen to the solitude within. The last poem that I will read is written in a Japanese form called haibun. It includes a haiku somewhere in the poem, but it also includes a prose statement. So it combines, the haibun form combines prose and poetry. And the Jane referred to in the poem, I taught in my first year of teaching, and she was an outstanding student, and she later became my osteopathic physician. Jane treated me with osteopathic manipulation and craniosacral adjustment for 20 years. She helped me with pain from the auto accident and with the diagnosis of acute and chronic Crohn's disease. We talked about the body's ability to heal itself, about alignment, about growing vegetables organically, and about allowing indoor cats to run in the great outdoors. My former student had become my teacher. Jane loved the outdoors. A tick lodged in her body. Farewell, dear physician.
Welcome back to the second half of this episode of For the Love of Words. I have with me the songwriter, singer, musician, Chris Payhood. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
I'd like to start by actually reading a review to the audience of you and your performances. Chris Payhood sings with all his heart, and his heart is huge. His voice and songs come from such a beautiful place. I smile every time I hear him sing and witness him doing what comes natural to him. His gifts make this world a better place. That was from your friend Mary Gaucher,
Indeed.
the very, very, very good folk singer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I won't ask you how you intend to live up to that review.
Well, I'm not really sure I can. Mary was probably the first person I ever asked to say something about me that I could put on my publicity, and this was quite a long while ago. Mary was still living in Boston, and I think I sent her an email, and I got a response in about 5 minutes. So she's just a wonderful person. Every time I see her, I ask her how she's doing, and she just says she's so grateful to be doing what she's doing.
As I'm sure you are as well.
Indeed.
You have your roots in Massachusetts, correct?
Yes, I do.
You
Yeah.
grew up in Needham,
I did indeed.
and now you live in the Quincy area.
That's true, yes.
You have a particular style that you yourself equate to the school of Fred Neil and the Rogers brothers.
Indeed, yes. Stan and Garnet Rogers, for
Right,
sure.
and that's sort of a traditional folk music type of background, is it not?
In a way, although certainly based on that sound. And actually, Garnet has told me that Stan and he listened to a lot of Fred Neil when they were growing up as well. So I'm not quite that caliber, but I may be in the same pew with those guys, yeah.
Well, I know from reading up on your background that your influences include, in your words, the cast of the movie The Last Waltz,
Yeah.
and Gordon Lightfoot, Tom Russell, David Olney, Ian and Sylvia. So that to me shows a real traditional folk music roots, to have those people as your influences. Although I can't say everybody in the cast of The Last Waltz fits that category.
Maybe not Neil Diamond, but I probably sang a Neil Diamond song or two in there somewhere too.
Let me ask this: when did you first start playing guitar?
Ooh, I actually first started playing in junior high school, but that was bass guitar. I was in a little surf band because all our voices were changing and we couldn't actually sing. So, and then from there, I think I sold my bass for a Gibson 6-string and started playing with friends. I was probably 15, 16 years old when I started.
Roughly what year would that be?
I was born in 1950, so 65, 66, 67. By 66 and 67, I think I had a folk band in Needham called the Town Dump, and which was our illustrious institution that everybody had to go to on Saturday and throw their trash off the berm.
Which is interesting because one of the songs on your website is a cover of Gordon Lightfoot's song "Softly" by the Town Dump.
Very old,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which
Lightfoot was a big influence for sure.
Right, which if anybody knows the song "Softly," it hardly goes with a group called the Town Dump. But that's another story for another time. One of the CDs that you have out is "Red Sky in the Morning." Can you tell the audience where they might be able to purchase this? Because after they hear you perform tonight, I'm pretty sure they're going to want to know where they can get your work.
Okay, they could email me at cpahud, so that's cpahud @gmail.com. I only have a handful left, so I haven't decided what I'm going to do once these finally run out. I may go over to a more of an online sales of individual tracks, but I may make some more. So there aren't many. I mean, literally only a handful left.
Well, hopefully the demand for this after this interview airs will make that decision for you.
Thank you, John.
I want to talk about one of the songs that's on this
Sure.
CD. It's called "Song for Melissa." I listened to that this afternoon, and I have to tell you, I was truly transfixed by the lyrics, and I could guess that it's a song from the lyrics. I could infer that it's a song that deals with someone who'd passed away. But until we met this evening before this interview began, I didn't know the background as to who Melissa was and why the song was written. And I think the audience would find it fascinating if you could relate that backstory.
Yes, Melissa was the daughter of a friend of mine, Melissa Gosel, who was tragically and brutally murdered back maybe 10, well, more than 10 years ago now, maybe 15 years ago. And her dad came to me and asked if I would sing or write a song about her, and in memorial to her. And one of her favorite phrases was Pura Vida, the love of life, and so I worked that in there. The main verse really just came to me kind of subconsciously, and then one of my best friends, who I've played music with since we were kids in Needham, gave me the lyrics to the bridge that I used that he had done for something else that he never finished, and that's pretty much how it came about. But yeah.
The music is not sad, but it's not a fast tune, but it's just perfectly paced
Well, thank you.
to recall someone and their life and the influence that they had on others. And I think that if people go to your website and listen to that song that's there, I'm sure that they will see exactly what I'm trying. It's so hard to describe. It's so hard to articulate how well that song is written and how well it's performed in the sense of what it's meant to do, to be a memorial for someone. And it was really wonderful to listen to. I want to talk a little bit, because we have a segment of our audience that are musicians. And I want to talk a little bit about something that you call yourself. You call yourself a Travis picker.
Yes.
And now, could you describe or define for our audience what is a Travis picker?
Travis picking, there are actually a few different variations. It was created by Merle Travis, who wrote 16 Tons, among other, terrific older folk songs. And it involves alternating, usually I use the two finger style Travis picking, and it's a kind of a pinch and an alternative motion with your fingers. It's finger picking. It's very hard to describe. I think it took me, after my friend Larry showed me when I was a teenager, when we were in the town dump, how to do it. It probably took me 2 weeks to get it down, yeah.
Will we see some of that in any of the songs you performed?
Sure, I could play a Tom Russell song, Travis picking, sure, for sure.
So let us close out this interview by letting the audience know where you're going to be performing. And August 10th, you're going to be at the Quincy Farmers Market at noon.
Correct.
August 21st, you're going to be at the Lizard Lounge in Cambridge at 9:30, and you're going to be performing with a group.
That's right. It's a group led by Joe Donnelly, who used to be the drummer for the band, the Del Fuegos. And it's just really super. We sit in the round. There'll be a lot of us. Folks like Chuck McDermott from Wheat Straw, Carolyn David, who used to sing with Patty Larkin, among other people. Dave Maddox, who'll probably be there from Fairport Convention. So Duke Levine, Kevin Berry.
Peter Wolf, maybe?
Maybe Peter Wolf, yeah, he often shows up. So these are all really top-notch people.
Well,
I'm honored to be there.
I think that after the audience sees your performance this evening, listens to you, they'll see that you fit right into that group. Thank you so much for coming by.
My pleasure,
to have met
John.
you.
Thank you, same here.
He had a blue wing tattooed on his shoulder. Might have been a bluebird, I don't know. But he'd get stone drunk and talk about Alaska. Salmon boats and 45 below. He said he got this blue wing up in Walla Walla, and his cellmate there was little Willie John. Now Willie, he was once a great blues singer. Wing and Willie wrote him up a song. They sang It's Dark in Here. Can't see the sky, but I look at this blue wing and I close my eyes and I fly away beyond these walls, up above the clouds where the rain don't fall on a poor man's dream. They paroled Blue Wing in August of 1963. He moved north picking apples to the town of Wenatchee. Then winter finally caught him in a rundown trailer park on the south side of Seattle, where the days grow gray and dark. And he drank and he dreamt a vision when the salmon still ran free, and his fathers crossed that wild old Bering Sea, and the land belonged to everyone. There were old songs yet to sing. Now he's narrowed down to a cheap hotel and a tattooed prison wing. Hey, it's dark in here, can't see the sky, but I look at this blue wing and I close my eyes and I fly away beyond these walls, up above the clouds where the rain don't fall on a poor man's dream. Well, he drank his way to L.A., that's where he died. No one knew his Christian name and there was no one there to cry. But I dreamt there was a funeral, a preacher in a cheap pine box. Halfway through the sermon, old Blue Wing begins to talk. He said, it's dark in here, can't see the sky, but I look at this blue wing and I close my eyes and I fly away beyond these walls, up above the clouds where the rain don't fall on a poor man's dream. Hey, hey, on a poor man's dream. Hey, hey, that last song was by Tom Russell. This one is by a friend of Tom's named David Olney. It's a song he wrote for his dad that often reminds me of my own father. It's called The Man in the Bed. Well, the man in the bed isn't me. I slipped out the door, I'm running free. Yeah, young and wild, I'll always be. Oh, the man in the bed isn't me. And these trembling hands are not mine. My hands are strong and steady all the time. They can swing a sledgehammer through the baby that's crying. These trembling hands are not mine. And that nurse over there doesn't yet know I ain't some helpless old so-and-so. I could have broken her heart not that long ago. While the nurse over there doesn't know that the man in the bed isn't me. I slipped out the door and I'm running free. Yeah, young and wild, like I'll always be. All the man in the bed isn't me. I've always been. I'm the kid who rode the rails through the Great Depression, fought in the big war, marched for the Union. I'm the man I've always been. So don't believe what the doctors say. They're just making things up so they can get paid. Yeah, it ain't me they're talking about anyway. Don't believe what the doctors say, 'cause the man in the bed isn't me. I slipped out the door and I'm finally free. Yeah, young and wild like I'll always be. While the man in the bed isn't me. Okay, this next one is a Fred Neil song, who was a major influence for me once my voice finally changed and I quit the surf band. And this song is called The Dolphins. Dolphins. This world may never change. It's been and all the ways of war. Can't change it back again. I've been searching for the dolphin in the sea. Sometimes I wonder, do you ever think of me? I'm not the one to tell this world how to get along. I only know that peace will come when all hate is gone. I've been searching for the dolphin in the sea. Sometimes I wonder, do you ever think of me? Sometimes I think about Saturday's child and all about the times when we were running wild. I've been searching for the dolphin in the sea. Sometimes I wonder, do you ever think of me? this world may never change the way it's been, and all the ways of war can't change it back again. I've been searching for the dolphin in the sea. Sometimes I wonder, do you ever think of me? That last song was by Fred Neil, who also influenced both Stan and Garnet Rogers. This next song was written by Stan and arranged by Garnet, and it's called Field Behind the Plow. Watch the field behind the plow turn to straight dark rows. Feel the trickle in your clothes, blow the dust cake from your nose. Hear the tractor's steady roar. Ah, you can't stop now. There's a quarter section more or less to go. And it figures that the rain keeps its own sweet time. You can watch it come for miles, but you guess you got a while. So ease the throttle out a hair. Every rod's a game, and there's victory at every quarter mile. Poor old Kuzik down the road, the heartache, hail, and hoppers brought him down. He gave it up and went to town. And Emmett Pierce the other day took a heart attack and died at 42. You could see it coming on, 'cause he worked as hard as you. In an hour, maybe more, you'll be wet clear through. The air is cooler now. Pull your hat brim further down and watch the field behind the plow turn to straight dark rows. Put another season's promise in the ground. And if the harvest's any good, the money just might cover all the loans. Well, you mortgaged all you own. Buy the kids a winter coat. Take your wife back east for Christmas if you can. All summer she hangs on when you're so tied to the land. For the good times come and go, but at least there's rain, so this won't be barren ground when September rolls around. And watch the field behind the plow turn to straight dark rows. Put another season's promise in the ground. watch the field behind the plow turn to straight dark rows, put another season's promise in the ground.
And that wraps up this edition of For the Love of Words, Artist Interviews and Performances. Thank you to our poetry artist, Ethel Fraga, and our music artist, Chris Payhood. Thank you to the Ames Free Library, the trustees of reservations, and the Eastern Shoveltown Cultural District for their support of poetry, music, and this program. And thank you to our recording engineers, Kim Pincus and Robert Miller. For the Love of Words is filmed at ECAT Studios at 50 Oliver Street, Northeastern, Massachusetts.